I'd like to introduce Malcolm from the United States, and Malcolm has multiple sclerosis. Welcome, Malcolm.
Hi, Linda.
Tell us, when were you diagnosed with MS?
I was diagnosed around 1991 when I was in my early 30s. I'm now 53.
And what was life like before you were diagnosed?
I was involved in sports. I played competitive soccer and competitive squash. I worked for a large corporation in sales and marketing. And I had one child. Normal life.
So what impact did it have on your life, you and your family, being diagnosed with MS?
Well, in the first 5 years, it did not have a lot of impact. I had what was typical of early MS. I had optic neuritis, which was treated with steroids. And it really didn't change my life too much, though I stopped playing soccer and I stopped playing squash because it became too difficult for me. But you couldn't really tell I had MS at that point.
So what led you to find LDN?
I didn't learn about LDN until around 2003, 2004. And I learned about it over the internet, as I think most people do. And I went to the main website, lowdosenaltrexone.org, and I read about it there. And I think, like most people, I said, why hasn't anyone told me about this? And in fact, I went to my neurologist and I asked him about low-dose naltrexone. And he immediately dismissed me, and I was a little bit too intimidated to press further about that. And at that point, I was beginning therapy on a drug called Naltrexone, which is a chemotherapy for MS, because my MS was going downhill quite rapidly. And so he didn't really want to hear anything about LDN, and I don't think he knew anything about it. And I was starting this new therapy, which I went in every 3 months for a infusion of chemo.
And how did you find that? Did it help?
No, it didn't. I did a year of it. It's a bit dangerous. In fact, now it's been found more dangerous. You have to have your heart tested every three to 6 months to make sure it's not doing damage to your heart. And there's a lifetime limit of only 12 infusions. And I didn't find it was helping me much. And at that same time, this new drug, Tysabri, came to the market. And the neurologist, in fact, I was referred to the University of Pennsylvania, to the head of the neurology department, to look into Tysabri, and he recommended that. And I stopped the Naltrexone, and I started on a couple years of Tysabri. It's interesting now I read that one of the worst things you should do is take Tysabri after Naltrexone. But they didn't know that then. So,
how did you get your prescription for LDN?
What happened was I found out on the National Multiple Sclerosis Society internet forum, I had read about someone who was taking a drug called 4-AP, which is called 4-aminopyridine, and it's a drug that helps people with nerve system damage. It helps their nerves function better. And quite a few people with MS had taken it, and it sounded very interesting. And a new drug was coming out called Ampra that was very expensive, but used this as its base chemical. And I wanted to try it rather than waiting for Ampra to be approved by the FDA here. So I contacted a guy on the internet forum. I said, where do you get your 4-AP? And he gave me a name of a doctor who I could call, and he would prescribe it. So I called him, and he said, yeah. And he said, I'd be happy to prescribe you 4-AP. And he said to me during this process, he said, "You have MS. Do you know anything about low-dose naltrexone?" I said, "Well, yeah, I've heard about it, but my neurologist doesn't encourage me to take it, but I've read about it on the internet." And he said, "LDN stops MS in its tracks." And I said, "Really?" And he started to tell me about his experience prescribing LDN for multiple sclerosis patients here in the United States. And I said, well, maybe it's time to try this. Because at the same time, I had just finished about 18 infusions of Tysabri, which is somewhat of a dangerous drug. 20 people have died from it so far. And a lot of people get brain infections from it. And it didn't seem to be helping me much. I was very concerned about taking it long term because the longer you take Tysabri, the greater your chance of getting this brain infection, which could possibly kill you. And I didn't find it was helping me much. And then the other thing that happened was I lost my job. And in losing my job, I lost my health insurance. So Tysabri costs about $5,000 a month if you don't have health insurance. So I couldn't afford Tysabri anyway. Mm-hmm. And LDN only costs $20 a month. So I said to myself, well, Tysabri doesn't seem to be doing me much good. It looks like it could be dangerous taking it long term. I can't afford it anyway because I don't have insurance, so I should be do something. Why don't I try LDN? So this doctor who was giving me the 4AP wrote me a script for LDN, and it was fulfilled through Skip's Pharmacy in Florida. And I had my prescription in about a week, and I started taking it. And that was about 2.5, 3 years ago.
So what has LDN done to help you so far, Malcolm?
Well, the most important thing that I've noticed with LDN is I don't seem to be progressing with MS. In the past 3 years, I don't seem to have gotten any worse, which is pretty amazing. And many symptoms have improved dramatically. The most significant symptom is a lot of people with MS complain about fatigue. And I was no exception. In fact, a lot of people who are taking interferon drugs, which I took for about 8 years, interferons contribute to this fatigue. And before I was taking LDN, it was not uncommon for me to have to nap a couple times a day. I was just exhausted all the time. LDN, I never nap anymore. I have absolutely no MS fatigue at all. Zero. I've also noticed that my balance is much better. I've also noticed that I had minor optical neuritis all the time when I had MS. In fact, it got a little bit worse when I was taking Tysabri. I would go through moments where I would start having double vision. I would just have to sit down, close my eyes, and rest for a half hour and try to get my eyesight back. It was mostly in my right eye. Ever since I've been taking LDN, my vision has been perfect. In fact, I just got new glasses about a year ago, and the eye doctor said that there is no evidence of any MS on my optic nerve, which I find that amazing. I have found one of the things that a lot of people with MS have is they have spasming, and it can occur in your legs. It can occur in your bladder. You have urgency to go to the bathroom. Your muscles just spasm. And I have found the bladder urgency has decreased remarkably. What else can I say about it? Most people who take LDN will also say that they generally feel better because of the endorphins. I feel better. I haven't gotten a cold since I've taken LDN. I haven't gotten sick at all. And the interesting thing is my wife also takes LDN. She started about 2 years ago, and she has a minor condition of Crohn's disease, which if you know much about Crohn's, it's very similar as an autoimmune disease to multiple sclerosis. She is doing exceptionally well on LDN for her Crohn's and has not had any significant flare-ups and is very happy with that. My father also takes LDN. I'll stop after this, but my father is 84 years old. He has progressive nuclear suprapalsy. Since he started taking LDN 2 years ago, his condition has not progressed much. And in going to his neurologist, who has been working with him, and she has quite a few patients with this condition, she has commented that he is doing the best of all of them and continues to prescribe LDN. That is quite remarkable, because this disease, basically, it's kind of a little bit like Parkinson's in the way it affects the brain. Usually people decline rapidly and die. And my father's pretty stable, considering he's 84 years old.
Did you or your wife or father have any introductory side effects when you started LDN?
The biggest side effect I had for the first week was the vivid dreams. First couple days I was waking up, first 2 nights I was waking up every hour or so, and the dreams were very intense. But after a week I got used to it, and now I find that I sleep better with LDN. I go to sleep faster. I stay asleep longer. I still have very intense dreaming, but generally it's very tolerable. And like I said, I sleep better.
Will you continue taking LDN?
Yeah, I will continue taking LDN, I think, as long as I live.
And what would you say to other people with multiple sclerosis who are thinking of trying LDN?
My feeling is that the LDN should be the first drug you try for MS. The sooner you take it upon diagnosis, I think the sooner you have the opportunity to correct what is going wrong in your body. I think it is a modern day medical tragedy that neurologists will take a newly diagnosed patient and put them on a highly toxic interferon or other MS drug that are expensive, have side effects, are difficult to administer. They involve needles or infusions, without giving a patient a try of LDN first for 6 to 9 months. There is just too much information out there that if you try this first and see how you do, you may do much better. Unfortunately, most people are like me. They decline on the disease for 15 years, and it is a last resort, and then they discover it helps, but unfortunately a lot of permanent damage has been done. I have a lot of permanent damage. I can't walk well. I require a cane or a walker or a scooter, but all that damage was done while I was taking these, in hindsight, very ineffective MS drugs. And I often wonder, what if I had learned about LDN in the early 90s and started taking it then? It is not going to hurt you where these other drugs can hurt you.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your story with us, Malcolm.